to do so far. So I'm actually stopping and doing that right now. But we are recording the event here today, and we're going to post that as we always do in the Coronavirus Response Center. So in terms of today's agenda, we'll go through panelist introductions, roundtable discussion with questions and answers. We'll give you a Code Council update at the end, and then we're going to give you some closing housekeeping notes and wrap up. That will also include a promotion of the next Building Membership Council meeting, which is right around the corner, and then the very next Fire Service Membership Council meeting. And we hope to be able to pull you through to join us for those events. So with that, we'll get right to it. Our panelists joining us today, as they have for the previous three, welcoming back Dan Dockery, the chair of the Building Membership Council and chief building official in Winston-Salem, Forsyth County in North Carolina. Gary West, the chair of the Fire Service Membership Council, director of field operations with the National Fire Sprinkler Association in Tennessee, and the former state fire marshal in the state of Tennessee. Ed Lazinski, Vice Chair of the Building Membership Council. He's Director of Building Inspection and Neighborhood Services for the City of West Allis in Wisconsin. And Randy Metz, Vice Chair of the Fire Service Membership Council. He's Battalion Chief and Fire Marshal in the Carlsbad Fire Department, City of Carlsbad, California. Welcome and hello to all of you. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. We've got a very healthy discussion lined up for the audience today, and we look forward to their questions. So with that, let's dive right into the whole issue again of the future of virtual inspections. We've heard that a number of times over the last month and a half as we've all been dealing with the coronavirus. And I think it's safe to say at this point, virtual inspections are either on the horizon or in many instances here to stay. So I open it up to all of you to kind of throw that topic around a little bit in our last session here to kind of talk about where do you see it right now, but more importantly, what do you see in terms of the future of virtual inspections as we move forward here into the month of May? Who'd like to take first crack at that?
I'll start with nobody else is going to jump in there. As a fire department inspector, we have been working on creating a policy on how we're going to do these things, just for some consistency and to be able to provide something in written format to the contractors. We have recognized some of the benefits, and we've recognized some of the pitfalls of doing remote inspections. We've had issues such as connectivity issues, dead spaces within portions of our city, locations where, depending on who your carrier is or how old the device is that the contractor may be utilizing, will impact how well the inspection goes. Issues with, lighting on trying to get the inspector to be able to see exactly what they would like to see, things like that. We would like to be able to continue this. So this has actually been a good segue for us to jump into the virtual inspection world here, because we do see the benefit of doing some of these even after COVID is done. Obviously using it on extremely large jobs probably will be difficult at best, but I know that there are jurisdictions that have gone 100% virtual, and they're doing extremely large inspections in the virtual world. So I think you're going to have to do a little bit of, trial and error, as we've said, even on our first week when we started this. We know a little bit more now, but we also know, how to put together a document, understanding now what some of the limitations are and what some of the workarounds are on how to make this work as best as we possibly can in light of what those limitations are with our contractors. And our contractors have been very willing to participate. They've been very understanding. They're fortunate they're getting inspections in any shape or form right now. So we want to definitely thank our contracting firms that we deal with that have been more than willing to serve as our beta testers as we work through this process.
Yeah, I think Randy's points are the biggest takeaway from that. Like we've been saying all 4 webinars here now, it's going to be a little bit different for everybody. There's so many factors to take into account of your staff, your area that you're covering, things like that. Connectivity is going to be a huge issue. You see somebody put that in the chats. When you're out in a lot of these undeveloped areas, yeah, you're not going to be able to get somebody out there. And actually, a lot of those, I'm in Wisconsin, up northern Wisconsin. We've got one guy will cover hundreds of miles of area that would be great for him to be able to sit in his office and just video into a bunch of areas. But a lot of those areas are so remote that he's not going to be able to do that. So I think looking at some pre-recorded video might be an option as well. Maybe drones, maybe there's some other things like that. But especially I think with re-inspections and some of those minor issues, if you've already been there, you've already done a physical inspection, having somebody go back through and just videotape. Here's the correction that I made, and emailing that back over to you. I think there's going to be a time and a place for that as well. So I think some of the other things that we talked about too is just that generational issue that we're going to have. That some of that younger generation that's coming up that's going to be replacing all of us in a few years. They're going to be a lot more tech savvy, and technology is always changing and always improving. So I think now we've kind of dipped our toe into the water here a little bit. I think there's going to keep being some technological improvements and policies, procedures improvements to kind of keep this momentum going and keep improving things as we go and as we find this useful.
I'll jump in. I would like to add that as you look around the country and you see all of the different agencies and how they're progressing forward, and especially, in my view, looking at a lot of the state fire marshals' offices, they're at different levels, and in areas there is connectivity, and a lot of areas, like many states, have rural areas where there's not. So all of those are going to play in as factors in this. And one of the best things I think is that we can learn from each other. And we've talked about this in the past, but as one jurisdiction is doing something good and others see that, we should be sharing that among all of our groups and progressing forward like that.
I think everything that was said are good points, very, very good points. And what we differentiate is what we can control and what we can't control. Oftentimes connectivity is carrier services, and we certainly can't control that. So we have to dismiss that and put that back for another day. I'm extremely excited, and I'm pleased, and actually I'm thrilled by what's happened. Not the COVID-19. I hate that part of it, but in a matter of days, and then a matter of weeks, and then just in a couple months, as a body of professionals across the United States, we have made changes in the way we do business that are just huge. We have developed ways to do virtual inspections and remote inspections. We have figured out ways to do digital signatures when we first said we couldn't do them. We have figured out ways to do all our permitting online when we thought we couldn't do it. We figured out ways to telework from home. We figured out ways to go mobile and be home-based when we thought we couldn't do it. All of these things that, as a body, whether it's a municipality or the entire United States, that we said we couldn't do, all of a sudden we figured out ways to do it, and we're doing a doggone good job of it. And because we've depended on one another, because we've shared information, and because we've communicated that information, we've made just tremendous strides in the way our business operates. And I think that everybody ought to be commended for that. And that's one of the reasons I'm so excited to be a part of this group right here, is because we get to see that, we get to hear from people, and hopefully we'll get to share that information when people send it to us. And remember, always remember that the emerging trend today, the new idea today, the way we approach a problem and fix it today, those things become best practices in the future when we share them, and it makes our body more effective, more efficient, and able to serve our public better. So I think it's a great thing, and I'm enjoying every second of it.
Yeah, for sure. And, I see some good questions starting to come here too. Anybody want to tackle a question on home stairway inspections? Have we seen anything come across on that in terms of either in your departments or others? I guess that's kind of an interior inspection question. And we know we've had a lot kind of floating around in terms of how would we do those either remotely or in person with PPE. But have you kind of seen anything along those lines in terms of home stairway inspections come across your desk? Thoughts on that?
Well, I've seen home stairway inspections. The very first one of these little virtual classrooms or whatever you want to call it we had, I saw a bunch of questions about stairways. And so I've got a question. Is it going to be rise and run? Is it going to be clearance height? Is it going to be width? Is it going to be handrails? There's so much. What question are we answering? I think maybe if we had a specific question, it might lead us into a productive conversation about that.
Yeah, sure.
And so I think Jake paused. Jake, send us a little more information about what you got.
Yeah, and Jake, if you want, my email and my colleague Nash our emails will be listed here, and we'll make sure that those get to the right people in the council. So Brian from New Jersey asks us. He says, "I'm wondering if ICC could assist state associations or local chapters." And let me see, I just kind of lost that here. Local chapters in providing financial assistance to purchase or provide equipment. So just so that you know, Brian, and all the rest of the folks in the audience, we're up to 282 people joining us today, and it's a great turnout for this last webinar. We'll have some information for you on some of the federal stimulus aid, but also what the ICC is doing in terms of trying to channel some of those dollars and carve some space out for just that in terms of the virtual inspections piece. So as always, your government relations representatives in the areas are really great resources for those kinds of things, and we are actively trying to work on and address that subject, particularly in Stimulus 4 that'll be coming up, and I'll have a little bit on that here near the end. So a quick question for the panel here too is that, on this issue of virtual inspections, what do you see in terms of what effects it's going to have on your workforce? Each of you have experience working for municipal government, in some cases state government as well too. And what happens as we start to incorporate more and more of this virtual work? I mean, I think we had a little discussion about that preparing for this in terms of it really seems like the discussions have been centered around efficiency and sitting people closer together, encouraging collaboration, maximizing space. What kind of effects will this have on our workforce and the footprints that they occupy in our organizations moving forward? Anybody want to take that one on?
I've currently been asked to sit on a panel with my group on establishing the return to work concept on what that's going to look like. And one of the issues that we're going to address is how many people will continue to work remotely or in a virtual world, and how many people I can bring back into the office given additional guidelines for social distancing and requirements like that. I'm probably not going to be able to put as many people into the fishbowl that I have working in a condensed lower square footage area now that we need to space people out. And unless there's additional unused locations available, it's going to require me to have people working remotely and working out of their vehicles or whatnot. And, it's going to be something that we're going to have to develop a workaround, establish additional policies and procedures that can be phased in as a lot of the restrictions are lifted with employees. It's not going to be something you can flip the switch and have everybody come back and resume working the same way they did before this all started 6 weeks ago. So I don't believe that there's a perfect one size fits all, because it may be specific to what your state requirements are. There are some considerations I think that everybody is going to have to think about as they do workspace planning in the future. That probably will stick with us for quite a while. But I see a lot of people asking questions on, best practices or best policy, or can you give us this? A lot of what we're doing again is giving you the ideas you to think about, because the best practices or the specific policies are so specific to your agency, your jurisdiction, your state, that it's difficult for us to create a one size fits all handoff that can be utilized anywhere in the country based on what your specific issues and needs are.
On that same note too, though, I know with the building membership council, and I'm sure the fire service membership council as well, we are going to start to collect some of these best practices and at least kind of give out. I don't want to say, we can't give you that one size fits all, but maybe we can give you a few tips and tricks of, in some of those larger jurisdictions, this typically tends to work, or this is what other people have done. In some of these smaller ones, this is what seems to work for some people and what they've found. This whole entire thing here, a lot of it is just documenting what we've been doing. Keep track of what works, what doesn't work. And again, it's not always going to work for everybody, ideas that we throw out there, but the more case studies and the more tips and tricks and things that do work for people, the more of those that we can collect and gather, the more of a robust, I guess, guide we can kind of give out there for people.
Yeah.
And then as that new technology comes in, 2-3 years down the road, we can start to look at, okay, things that might not have worked now, maybe now that can work. Maybe now there is some technology out there, and we documented why it didn't work before. Now we can take a look at that again and say, yeah, actually now this can work that way because of what we have available to us now. So so keep everybody out there, and I forget what we have, 280 some people on here. Keep track of what works, what doesn't work, and communicate that back to the membership councils and get involved in those. And I know we'll talk about those a little bit later on, but talk to your neighbors, neighboring communities, and everybody. Gather up what's working and what's not, and make sure that you pass that along so we can kind of compile those.
And I think to wrap this piece up, it would be a good idea to talk a little bit about what the Code Council is doing at the national level on this subject too. So I think moving out of this and more to that issue of best practices, there already have been discussions about standards development on this subject, and I think I mentioned it last week. I've been participating in discussions between the ICC, the National Fire Protection Association, or the NFPA, and ASTM, standards making organization. And, all three of our organizations are focused on different pieces of this. I believe that the Code Council and the NFPA and ASTM are going to be issuing a joint statement about us working together on this here in the next couple of weeks. That's in the works. And then there will be product development from each of our organizations that will certainly follow that. So, what I would do is point folks to join into these conversations at the membership council level, and we can drive those conversations into some of this development process that will happen here shortly. But I think that really will kind of be the end result of some of these case studies and some of the best practices that we see during this in the field. So with that, I'll switch gears a little bit into future planning and kind of suggest that, based on our discussions, if you're not doing it, you need to be thinking about it for sure. And I heard that early on in this, and I think it brings with it some interesting considerations. What do we think in terms of how operations might be conducted? Not necessarily a full reopening, but are there things like interim daily operations? At what point, are we thinking about the potential for future shutdowns? So there's been a lot of discussion around a potential resurgence in the fall that of COVID-19 that could be or maybe not linked to flu season. So in terms of the future planning pieces, what are you all seeing and hearing around the country on that piece of it, and what kinds of things are you working on?
Well, from the fear of all of this coming back again, I think that we all have to be cautious, and our new future is not what it is today. It's the new normal, and as we do all of our work, it's going to be very important that we use the precautions and that are out there, and that we take it, that we're very careful in what we do. As I monitor the construction industry from around the country, uh, some of it's coming back really good, and the last thing that we would want is is an issue with this coming back with the flu season, with anything. Reoccurrence of all of this would be terrible to the economy, terrible to us getting back to any kind of normalcy. So I think it's very important that we follow precautions and that we continue to be cautious as we move forward. I, I, I do think everyone believes it's time, and in those places where you can, we should, but we just need to be follow the instructions, and our new normalcy will be different in the future.
Anybody else with thoughts on the kind of the interim recovery here, and how you might be approaching it, maybe even in your own organization?
I think one of the keys is to develop phases, so you're not trying to do everything all at one time, and put it down on paper first. Look at what those phases look like as you return to the new normal, as Gary said. Some of it's the unknown normal, but if you develop these phases, then it may make it easier if in the future you have to ramp back down again, that you can take a phased approach to get back to where you are. You'll know which services you can provide, safely in a limited manner. But document what you did, what you've done now, and what you plan on doing, so that if you have to do it again, you've got a roadmap to follow.
So here's a good one for you. What are some of the key triggers for you to consider, as you do this reopening? At what point do we get past the phased piece of this and, kind of having our own people taking care of it? At what point do we start to look at integrating the public into that, and what are some approaches? Ed, I know you had an example there in Wisconsin that you
Yeah.
shared earlier, but it's like, so what are the triggers for that? I mean, at what point is it okay to have the public interfacing with members of the public sector, and trying to get some of this work restarted?
Sure. Are you talking with City Hall?
Yeah, I mean, I thought that was an
Yeah.
interesting example you shared earlier.
Yeah. So one of the things that we're doing right now, in my jurisdiction is, we have an older City Hall. The building's been pretty well cleared out for the last month now. So, some of the things that administration started to look at is just how everybody kind of operates in that building. So, so some of the things that we're doing right now is we're actually remodeling the lobby so that the public can't get through there, and they'll sort of be stopped, and there'll be a receptionist right up front there to take permits and take tax payments, water payments, all that type of stuff right up front. So it also leads to just building security. Traditionally people have just been able to wander throughout the building and go to visit whichever department they wanted to go to. So there's a little bit of that building security to it, but also just sort of some of those efficiencies that we're building in, and now's sort of the time to do it. We're also looking at kind of the space that each department takes up in the building, and taking a look at, we touched on it earlier, just do some of these positions that have been working remotely, can they stay as maybe as a permanent remote position. And, and that person would, maybe just have share a workstation with somebody else. And so they're just coming in. Do they need as much space as they used to? Do you need every building inspector have his own private office with his own desk and everything, or can some of them share those? And it does kind of go back to that phased approach a little bit with, maybe one of them comes in on Mondays, the other one comes in on Tuesdays. You kind of social distance who's actually in the building that way. But but some of these things maybe they're going to stick around for a little while, and you might find that there's some efficiencies built into that, so you can kind of take a look at all the operations that you have, and just now I guess it's sort of now's the time to take a look at question everything that you do, and take a look at it and see if there's ways to improve that, and provide some better customer service out there.
And Gary, I think people have probably noticed that you're in a little bit of a different space and maybe didn't remodel your office. So how was it that what compelled you to get back to work at another location here?
Well, it's time. I generally work out of my home, but probably more so on the road. In my job, I'm on the road all the time. But for the last 30, 40 days, we've all been working from home. And now we're all, the Tennessee group is working here at our office in the fire department. We've rented the back of the fire department to put our office here. NFSA has a local office here. Our headquarters is still in Baltimore, but we're able to function better here than in Baltimore right now with all of the restrictions and stuff. So it is different. It's totally different. And I started this call at the fire chief's desk, and the fire chief came in, so I moved over to another office. I'm just kind of moving around today, but that's what it's about. So.
Oh, good. Well, you guys keep safe there, and we'll be eager to hear a little bit more about, some of the distancing and space requirements and all that. And, maybe it's an opportunity to give a quick plug about the event that you've got coming up later this week too. You said you had a lot of people registered for that.
Yeah, we have over 1,000 people right now registered for the National Fire Sprinkler Association seminar. Every year we do an annual seminar. It's a conference that goes on for about a week, but we had to cancel that because of all this. It was supposed to be held last month. So tomorrow and Friday we'll be having a virtual conference. And the best thing about the conference this year is it's free to anyone. And you can go on our website at nfsa.org to register for that, and you'll be sent a link to come in on that call. And like I said, there's over 1,000 people there that's coming. Our speakers are very, very good. The speakers that are speaking, it's in the afternoons from like noon into the afternoon. The conference is, we're giving CEUs for that in different states, but the conference is a lineup of speakers that we had lined up for our original conference. So it's a good group of people. So thank you for that.
And good luck with that event too. I know you're all together just trying to figure out how to make it through that. So good fortune with that event. Randy, you had discussed previously a little bit of a change in terms of the footprint. Maybe you haven't quite figured it out yet, but what does it look like for your organization, and what kinds of things are you hearing from your city in terms of future planning? What are you having to look at?
Our city's looking at, we'd been looking even at before COVID came, the idea of telecommuting and what the possibilities of that would be as we try to work within our own climate action plan and reduce greenhouse gases. We're a very environmentally conscious coastal community here in Southern California. And this put us into that much earlier than we planned. But now that we've actually implemented it, we're looking at how many of these employees actually need to return back to an actual workstation. How many of the employees can do a hybrid with a couple days at home and a couple days in an office? Will they need their own personal workspace, or can they use a touchdown station, or the city's referring to it as hoteling, with shared workspaces that are much smaller? So we are heavily looking at how that affects the entire building that my fire prevention bureau is housed in. We may not be able to implement a lot of that since a lot of my inspectors pretty much need to be here. That would be our preference, and utilize the virtual inspections as a tool when appropriate, or to clear reinspection items, not necessarily be the frontline approach that we use for inspections, but we are fully anticipating bringing them back. But then looking at how much I have to separate them now. When I have 3 or 4 inspectors that share one office with small workstations, not being able to put them that close to each other anymore, what does that look like? How do I spread my workforce out? Am I going to work them in shifts? Am I going to alternate them on the days that they work? Those are all considerations that I'm going to have to work within. And as my city establishes the policy, are they going to have to wear masks? Are the cubicle height walls high enough to make our risk manager feel comfortable? A lot of these are decisions that I am not making on my own. I'm having to take direction from our risk manager's office because they're not specific to me. They're specific to all city departments. And they're giving us the opportunity as division managers or department heads to put input into that process. But what the final process looks like ultimately is going to be decided by people higher than myself in the food chain here. We're still somewhat anxious to see what that looks like, because that will definitely play into how I need to reorganize my staffing patterns to meet what the new city standards are to employment within the building here.
Yeah, for sure. Good summary. I mean, that's great information and just one example of kind of how things are working too. Dan, I'd like to come to you next to talk about that, but just interject a quick reminder to the audience that we do have a question and answer feature in this WebEx event. And if you'd like to go ahead and send us questions on this topic or any others that we're covering, just type it into the chat window, and myself and all of the panelists will be able to see that, and we'll get through as many as we possibly can. So Dan, who are the folks that how big is the coordination element that you're having to coordinate with in terms of getting your folks kind of either, resettled or back to work, future planning? But I mean, not just the decision space that you're in, but who else are you having to coordinate with in terms of the kinds of things Randy's talking about and getting your people back in?
Well, we have to coordinate with everybody, and we have to separate what's an essential function of the city, and we have to take consideration of the politics that are going to surround everything we do. And then we've also got to dismiss what we know is not going to help us get better at what we do, or more efficient or more effective at what we do. And then we've got to have a plan for when that item, which oftentimes is brought up by a council member or a commissioner or a mayor, comes back to the table. It's a day-by-day thing. There's no one-size-fits-all answer. I've heard that a lot. I've heard the words new normal, which I absolutely love because it's so true. You can't brass tack this thing. You have to be very flexible. You have to be very open, and you have to listen all the time. I noticed connectivity's a word used in a lot of these questions, and let's change the connectivity part to communication part, because connectivity puts the burden on somebody else. Communication puts the burden on us. Make sure we're talking to everybody involved. Make sure we're listening to everybody who has an opinion, good or bad. Make sure that we take consideration of it, because we'll need it later on. And make sure that everything we learn, we use as we go forward. I can't help, the whole time we've had this discussion, I've looked at your bullet point for future planning. And the first one, if you're not doing it already, you need to be. Again, we made great strides in a short time, but we have to be efficient. We have to be proactive, and we have to look to the future. Under what conditions will you reopen? Well, it varies by communities. We don't know. And a lot of that is political pressure. A lot of it is controversial. A lot of it is driven by, I hate to say it, but social media. So that's where we are on that. How will you conduct interim daily operations in the next phase? We don't know yet. We know that virtual inspections and live remote is working. We know that shuttering part of your office and having part of your people telework in many cases is working. How many of those things become part of our standard daily operations? If we look at where we are budget-wise in our communities right now, we know that next year is going to be a terror because municipalities are losing money. So what are we going to do with shorter staffs, with open positions that we thought we could fill, and now they're going to be gone to satisfy a budget? How are we going to make it work? No new purchases, less travel, less training. All of these things are big considerations, but they're very broad, and there's not a good answer for any of them except for what do you have to do to make sure that you're benefiting your community. Do you have a plan for future shutdowns? What are we going to do if this comes back in October or November with flu season? Are we going to be prepared for it? Are the lessons we learn now going to be documented, shared, communicated with one another so we can pick them up and put them right back in place if we need to be? And if we've made good changes, prudent changes, positive changes now, we don't have as many hard decisions or as much trouble acclimating us ourselves when it comes back again. A long and rambling way of saying we're in the middle of a lot of good answers right now. We've just got to open our eyes, trust one another, communicate with one another, put them in place, document how they're doing, and then share them when they work well.
Yeah, no, well said there. And I was just taking a look at a quick question that came in from Doug Wise. Doug, I'm going to try to come to you here really quick, so you might be able to kind of ask this to the group if you're monitoring here. Let me see if I can find you here in the question list so I can unmute your mic. It's a super question, and I think totally relevant to the conversation. So I just unmuted you, Doug. You want to ask your question to the panel?
Yeah, I mean, the question I have is, we have concerns that if we minimize the inspection process during the pandemic, that we're sending a perception that what we do is not as important as we have tried for many years to make it. And, so it's really, how do I say this? We're sort of the silent defenders, is what we've always said. If we do our job right, nothing happens. So now if we're not showing up on inspections, what kind of perception does that send? And it's sort of my concern that we are doing full inspections. We're going into houses, even if they're occupied. We're wearing rubber gloves and N95 respirator masks, and our folks have liberal amounts of gel. And I just am concerned that folks that are not doing that are sort of sending the wrong message. And I'm wondering if anybody else shares that, or am I just crazy?
Well, hey, really quick before we answer that, tell us where you're from and what your position is too, just so everybody knows.
I'm the director of the building department at Palm Beach County, Florida. It's a east coast of Florida. We got 1.5 million people.
Very good. And thanks so much for joining us, and stay safe there. We'll get to your question here. So who wants to take that one on?
I want to jump on it first thing. And first of all, I want to say thanks to Doug Wise. He just started his first term as a building membership council member. And because of this question, he's now going to be an integral part of our Inspectors Raise the Profile program. And we're going to put a lot of work on him. But it answers his question. What do we strengthen? The mistaken perception that what we do isn't critically important to ensure the safety of the communities we serve. That is a never-ending question. It's an age-old question since the time inspections and fire personnel started trying to ensure safety. We get in, we get out. A lot of times people don't know we're there. Fire's lucky in one sense is that when you show up, there's a great big blaze and people can see it. So you have that going for you, but that's not enough to change the perception of the entire public. We need to somehow figure out a way to make our municipals organizations, our council members, our commissioners, our mayors, our city managers understand what we do and why, and get that message where we can move it to the public. If we had won that battle a long time ago, this wouldn't even be a question now, but we haven't. We've ignored that time and time again. We've got to raise the profile on building safety officials. We've got to ensure that the communities know how much we provide to them in the way of building safety. And we've got to be willing to take on the burden of being recognized. And that sounds silly, but a lot of times what drives inspectors and building safety officials away from that recognition is the fact that they just don't want to put up with the burden of the public. Once you start it, you got to be willing to take the phone call. And that's the good phone call. That's the bad phone call. You've got to want to take the phone call first. You've got to want them to reach out to you first because you're the person who can handle it in the building safety world. We don't want the obligation. And Doug, thanks for that question. But that's what we've got to do first. And then what we've got to do is, as we develop partnerships with the people we serve, that's the builders, designers, and all, we communicate with them. We find ways to make them recognize, number one, how important these programs like Live Remote are, but also how particular we have to be in what we allow to be done live and remote. And again, that's one of those things, if we communicate well, we can develop some consistency in it. And that dog doesn't like me when I talk, I guess. I don't know who it is. But anyway.
That's mine, Dan.
I'm just picking on you. We have to make a message, and we have to send the message out, and we have to communicate the message, and then we have to be consistent about enforcing it and sharing it with the public. We'll solve Doug's problem. Don't get me started on raising the profile of the building inspector. We'll be here for 7 more days.
That was a great answer. Lots of great reaction coming back. Doug says thanks, by the way, too. And just to the rest of the folks out there, the 284 of you that we've got on this afternoon, thanks for joining us. And Doug was not a plant. I mean, that was a legitimate question that came up, and I think it struck a chord here with Dan. So fantastic. What I wanted to do was in the time that we have left, switch gears. We've got a couple more topics to cover and some updates to give you. Very briefly, I wanted to touch on a thorny issue for all of you, and I think everybody in the audience too, which is going to be, we've got community reopening and economic recovery on the horizon, right? There are a lot of things that are either directly related or tangential to the jobs that our code officials do, and those come up in terms of what do occupancy load restrictions look like when restaurants and businesses reopen, not just restaurants, but all of the places that we go. So I didn't mean to just kind of target them, but there's a lot of question about the who's in charge, who's going to be coming up with these policy decisions, who has to enforce whatever is come up with. And I guess maybe the question that I have, schools is an issue too. We've already started to see some school policies starting to come out where I live here in Northern Virginia. So, as we address that at the high level today, I don't want to get into weeds because I know, again, it's going to vary locality by locality and it can become very political. What I would say is, what are some of the things that our audience members can do to kind of help prepare for this onslaught of stuff that we haven't had to deal with before? I mean, we talked a little bit about this, which is, we've got occupancy and load already determined, right? So, it applies directly, but then again, it's tangential when it comes to a public health issue. How do folks get ahead of this, and what's your advice to them to kind of brace for impact as this starts to come to the forefront of what they're doing every day?
I'll say that.
Go ahead.
Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Gary, why don't you take it first?
Me?
Yep.
Okay, I'm sorry. I'm just going to say that PPE is going to be something for code officials. Is going to be something we'll have in our pocket from now on, I believe. I believe that the masks are going to be here to stay, as well as their gloves and protective equipment. Just as the firefighters wear their PPE, all code officials will need to have PPE available in the future. And you'll have local guidelines to follow, and that'll be part of our world from now on, I believe.
Ed, your thoughts?
Yeah, well, I guess as we start to get some of these businesses to open up and everything, and again, everybody's going to be a little bit different. People have different state requirements, local requirements, everything on how this is going to start to open up. But I think the biggest thing is just going to be communication, both with the business owners and internal. Some of these, they may fall under building, may fall under fire, may fall under health, maybe police. I mean, there's a whole bunch of different routes that some of the municipalities could take on who's going to end up enforcing some of these things. But I think as building and fire officials, I think we need to keep in mind some of the things that are most important to let these places open up. If a restaurant is, just for example, say a restaurant's allowed to have 50 people total inside their building. Well, they look at, sort of the back area of the restaurant and say, well, we're just going to keep people kind of up front here. We can totally shut off that back. Well, maybe that's the rear exit, and so by them blocking that off, they're blocking exits, things like that. The restaurant owner, they're really good at making a cheeseburger. They have no idea about fire codes and egress and things like that. To them, it's smart. We're going to keep the people up front. We're not going to let them go in the back. So, we need to get out there. We need to communicate all this stuff to our business owners about safe practices, with limited occupant load inside those buildings. There's going to be other things. These buildings have been sitting vacant, potentially vacant for a month or so. You've got old water in the pipes now. So, are you worried about Legionella starting to pop up in some of these places where, they haven't been running water, they haven't flushed out the system very much. Now you turn that stuff on and who knows what's coming out. So, there's a lot of issues out there. These buildings have been sitting vacant. They might be used in a limited capacity. There might be egress systems in the back that, somebody says, hey, I'm not gonna keep the lights on in the back right there because nobody should be going back there. But if that's an egress route, it all comes back to communication and getting out there, meeting with your community partners, shaking their hand again, saying, hey, it's great to see you back up and open. And I know Dan's got some comments on shaking hands, but just saying, hey, we're glad you recovered. Here's a few tips and tricks and things to keep in mind as you start to use your building and as you phase it back into a full operation again.
Yeah, and I think you hit on something there too, without maybe saying it, which is just kind of this heightened or hypervigilance that we could have for those kinds of environments, right? I mean, people are going to be, as we said before, and I know Dan led us down this path on previous webinars, which was, people are being forced to make really big decisions with the best information that they've got right now, and just use, the ultimate in, kind of best judgment, right? And remaining flexible, as you say. So, I think that's probably a really good message for folks to take away. And I guess getting to the transition to the point that Dan was connecting with, that positive value of a handshake was something that I know is super important to you. And maybe brings us into our next topic here, which is, what do our chapter meetings look like? What are the kinds of professional development activities that we do on a day-to-day event, whether that be training, education, or anything else? What are the effects on that, and what do you think those kinds of things look like moving forward? Dan, did you want to kind of take that one in the context of the shake hands and get reopened again, and maybe transition into it?
I'll start it, but we got to remember that not everybody has the same capabilities. Not everybody has the same resources. Not all of us are the same size. And when you look at us from that perspective, all of these things that we've just touched on become very, very important. In Colorado, the very first question was connectivity. They don't have the cell signals. Everything becomes a factor. The only thing I guess I'd love to say is take your positives and put them in a list on one side, your negatives on another, and think of ways that you can let your positives outweigh the negatives, that you can use the positives, the things you've got, to get around the negatives. And the biggest one, and we've said the word a bunch, is communication. And I really do miss shaking hands. Shaking hands to me is the best thing you can do. It's a sign of trust. It's a sign of mutual understanding. It's a sign of working together. It's a celebration of being able to become partners with the people that you serve. And that's literally everybody in your community. Every single person who lives in a house, who works in a building, who visits a park, who comes to visit somebody who works in a building, who goes to the movie theater, you get my drift? Everybody is your partner in this business. And because we don't have the same resources, we have to find new ways, better ways to get together with one another. And that's, you build partnerships. You say we're building houses. Well, we're building communities. We're building relationships. And I want to just remind everybody before we go any further with this, you're not in this alone. I don't care whether you feel like you're isolated because you're one person in a department of 100, and now that you're working from your home and you're working remote, you're not getting that encouragement, that physical contact, or whether you're one person out in Colorado or Arizona who has a jurisdiction that's 250 miles wide and you're the only inspector. You are not alone. That's what the building membership councils, the fire service membership councils, the other councils, that's what we're for. We're here to help serve you and make you able to do your job better. We want to be a part of what you do because that makes us vital. And, you want to communicate, somebody send me an email, say, here is a virtual handshake, and I'll know that I've got another partner. And that's what we'll do is we'll become partners in this. You're not alone, not at all. We're here together. We're going to make this thing happen, and we're going to do a darn fine job of it.
That's a great message. And, I have to tell you that our staff is not unlike many of yours too, and that, we're facing those kinds of travel restrictions all the way through September right now too. I know Randy and I had a discussion that I think that your city, is kind of locking down on travel through the end of the year.
Mhm.
Gary, we had a similar conversation about your staff there too. So, how we find those ways to make these, personal connections here over the next several months that we're not getting right now through events like this and other virtual ways to be able to conduct that kind of business, to take the training, to be able to get to these events and participate and keep that part of us moving is going to be super important. So with that said, we're getting a little bit tight on time here. We got about 5 minutes left, and I wanted to just transition us very quickly into an ICC update, and then we'll have our panel maybe engaged here for just a couple more minutes at the end talking about our upcoming meetings. So I wanted to just give the folks on the webinar today a quick update on the federal funding. As we mentioned at the end of our webinar last week, and we expected to see it happen. Stimulus 3.5 was signed on Friday, April 24th by the president. A quick rundown on that is on your screen. $483 billion package, primarily focused on making the SBA Paycheck Protection Program whole again. $60 billion for economic relief for small business, $75 billion hospitals and healthcare workers, and then $25 billion for expanded COVID-19 testing. So there's some other variables that are in there. So if you do the math on the numbers, they don't completely add up to 483, but those are really kind of the big moving parts of that bill, and it should start kind of hitting the street here in the coming days and weeks. Stimulus 4.0 is something that I really wanted to focus on today and let the folks on the webinar know that our government relations team, both in DC and in the field, are monitoring the development of this package. We are actively working with Congress right now on language to help leverage funding for building and fire officials and our members, and even those tangential stakeholders in our organization, like designers and engineers, constructors, building owners, and managers, to find ways to leverage federal funding for those virtual code activities. So I would focus you again on the ICC's Coronavirus Response Center, our website under advocacy, as well as your government relations staff for further information on this as it breaks. There's no date for that development. We know it's likely going to happen, but it's going to be hard fought at this point, particularly with kind of both sides digging in on the red lines, so to speak, for what they need to or want to see included in this package. So we'll give you more information on that as it breaks, and stay tuned to our communications vehicles for that. Shifting gears now into where we're leaving off this webinar series, but continuing on with even more events for you. May is Building Safety Month, and that starts May 1st, which is this Friday, runs the entire month. What I want to highlight is the Building Safety Month website, buildingsafetymonth.org, and in particular, week 1 is themed as disaster preparedness. So we have a really great webinar coming up a week from tomorrow. So it'll be Thursday, the 7th of May, I believe, at 1 in the afternoon Eastern time. And joining us are going to be a number of members from the disaster preparedness community. We've invited and received good feedback from a number of panelists, including Carlos Castillo, who is the acting deputy administrator for resilience at FEMA. He is going to take time out of what is a very busy work schedule and join us for an hour and a half, along with his colleague, Catherine Fox, who is the associate administrator for mitigation at FEMA as well. And they're going to talk to us about disaster preparedness, kind of both in the context of COVID, but also we're right in the middle of spring flood season and moving very quickly into hurricane season here. So they'll have some good updates for us on that. Also joining us will be former FEMA Administrator Brock Long will be on the panel, talking about FEMA's community lifelines and the insurance gap that I know is in planning and zoning and the building codes, and how important those are not only to our community, but to overall community preparedness and national preparedness. And then we'll have several senior members, again, from the stakeholder groups, the engineers, the design professionals, constructors, and building managers and owners, hopefully, to flavor that conversation. So we'll have more information coming on that shortly. I'll be hosting that in a very similar format for about 90 minutes, and CEUs will be offered for that again next Thursday, the 7th at 1 o'clock Eastern. So please join us for that. Quick reminders, the Innovation and Code Administration Award application deadline is June the 30th. That's an organizational award. Organizations can nominate themselves for it, and we have examples on our webpage for that. And also, ICC is still in the midst of its call for committees. Volunteers needed. Application deadline for that is June the 1st, 2020. As a reminder, today's session again has been recorded. Our Coronavirus Response Center is iccsafe.org under the Advocacy tab, and then Coronavirus Response Center. You'll see that information there in this seminar or webinar, as well as the others that we've done, not just with the council leadership, but all across the ICC enterprise are posted there. I wanted to give Dan and Ed just a quick opportunity to talk about the next Building Membership Council meeting that's scheduled for Wednesday, May the 6th, 3 p.m. Eastern. Dan, Ed, any comments on that and what you've got coming up during that meeting?
Go ahead, Ed. I've talked enough almost.
No, I guess, yeah, and I know we're running short on time here and everybody's got to get going, but yeah, I mean, the BMC, we're working on a whole bunch of really great stuff right now. We do have 3 subcommittees that meet regularly, so I encourage anybody on here, if you're interested in, if any of this stuff sounds interesting, definitely join up. We have a Raise the Profile subcommittee, which goes through basically just how to promote what we do out there on a day-to-day basis, and then we have a community best practices and innovation committee, which that kind of works on obviously community best practices and gathering some of those, and that's where a lot of I mentioned earlier to make sure that you're documenting and recording what works and what doesn't on this. So that subcommittee is going to be putting a lot of this stuff together. So and then our third subcommittee is a continuity and outreach committee, and that's one that takes all the different membership councils and kind of shares stories amongst them so that we're not duplicating efforts. So just a lot of really cool stuff like that we have going on. We're kind of getting everybody prepared to hopefully kind of pull out of this stuff and kind of get ourselves prepared for the ABM coming up. So I think I kind of covered it, Dan. Anything I missed there?
Just one extra thing. Again, reminder everybody, the next meeting's Wednesday, May the 6th at 3 p.m. And we'd love to have you on the call. If you're not a member of Building Membership Council or Fire Service Membership Council, it's very, very simple to get on the mailing list. You just do it from your iccsafe.org website, and you go to your membership council's page, and there's a process. It will take you no more than 2 minutes to become a member of the council. It'll take you no more than 2 minutes to sign up to become a contributor, to become a partner, to help get this message out.
Fantastic.
We look forward to it.
Yeah, and we'll have information, my email and Bill Nash's email. Again, we're the staff liaisons for the councils will be on the next slide and left up when we wrap up here today. Similarly, Gary, Randy, any comments on the next Fire Service Membership Council meeting that we'll be holding Thursday, May the 21st at 1:30 p.m. Eastern?
Yes, we just had our meeting last week. We had great attendance. Thanks to all who have joined in with us, and appreciate your your help there. I'll let Randy finish up, but before I do, I want to say everyone should send Dan a virtual handshake. I noticed that here in the comments, people have started doing that, but I'd like to see 300 handshakes come to you, Dan, because you deserve it.
I
And
love you, Gary. Thank you, brother.
your motivation has been great, and I've loved being on these calls with all of you because we've had great motivation here. Our calls preparing for this have been great too. So thank you. And Randy, you want to finish out?
Yeah, I just want to really encourage everybody to visit the Fire Service Membership Council site on the ICC website. We do have 4 subcommittees as well that you can get involved in, that we're actively seeking people to participate in there. Emerging issues, public awareness, training and education, and trying to think of what our 4th one is. Membership development. Membership development. So they have items that they're working on. They are chaired by really outstanding people in the industry that need your help, and we hope that you'll take this opportunity now that you've been exposed to the membership councils through these webinars to look for more ways to get involved and be part of the process as we move forward from COVID-19. And we look forward to hearing all of you on our next phone calls. And I've really enjoyed the time with these 6 gentlemen here as we prepared these. And I hope we'll be able to do it again sometime soon.
That's really great. And I want to make sure that I'm not remiss. And, we may be on the screen here, but my colleague, Bill Nash, who is also the staff liaison for the Building Membership Council, has been central to the success of these and along with us for every planning meeting that we've had. So thank you to Bill. And also thanks to you, gentlemen. I think, as I said earlier today in our preparatory call for this, mission accomplished. I mean, if you want to talk about an opportunity to lead by example within the Code Council, I couldn't be more thrilled to have been a part of a joint effort like this that I think will kind of stand up and show others kind of how it's done within the organization. And I know we're planning for maybe a month from now to circle back and talk about the next time that we can get the 2 councils together and do a virtual event, or maybe even do an externally facing event like this. Who knows how that will go, but there's certainly no shortage of topics to discuss here. So it's been really a privilege and an honor to work with you all and kind of get out of the way and let you all kind of speak and get the message, the right Code Council message out to our members. So thanks for doing that. In terms of wrapping up here today, thank you to the folks in attendance. I think we peaked at about 286. We're still carrying about 260 members here as we wrap up this afternoon. The Building Membership Council and the Fire Service Membership Council, thank you for participating. And you'll see, again, Bill Nash and my information here. Please feel free to email us if you're interested in any of the topics that we've talked about today or need further information, and also to be able to join the membership councils. We'll get you onto those respective lists. So until the next time that we get together, everybody stay well, stay safe, and stay healthy. And we look forward to seeing you in future opportunities kind of along these lines. So thank you very much for attending, and have a good rest of your workday.
Carl, thanks for a great job, man.
Yep. Yeah, thanks, guys.
Yeah, thanks.
Thanks, Carl.
Yeah, appreciate it, guys. It's been an absolute pleasure. So can't thank you all enough, and look forward to the next time we can do this.
Absolutely.
Yeah, fantastic. All right, well, you guys take care. We'll schedule maybe a debrief